with regards to the factors that led to the emergence of Boko Haram, there are two things here. I think it is important we make a very good distinction between emergence and evolution, emergence and transformation. The social, political, economic context in northern Nigeria shows that it's very easy for any group to emerge because of the level of marginalization, the level of exclusion. Recently, I was just in Benue State with all the Fulani herdsmen attacks in Benue State and the lack of attention given by the government. So then you have this movement in Benue State which is called Movement Against Fulani Attack. And if for a very long time the government doesn't pay any attention, nobody knows what that kind of movement can evolve to be in the future. So the point I'm making is that the social economic conditions for the emergence of groups are very, very important. And when I was interviewing a lot of the Boko Haram members in prison, particularly in Abuja, in Yola, and even in Maiduguri, most of them will tell you we simply love our religion. And that is why we formed a group. And then secondly, the arrogance of the politicians and the way they display that wealth. And then thirdly, probably the Western construct of the Nigerian state that has been imposed on us doesn't seem to answer some of the questions they were expecting. And in a situation where opposition has been suppressed, particularly for a very long time, under the military, and even the coming of the political class, where opposition is very, very low, people have to look for other channels and alternatives. So these were the issues regarding emergence. But the bigger question is, Boko Haram is not the only Islamic group that probably have emerged in the north, especially in the northeast. You have groups like Al-Jannah Tabbas that I came across in Gombe. You have other groups like Al-Medinatul Kefi, nobody talks about. But none of these groups have transformed in the way and manner of Boko Haram. So the most important question is not so much about the emergence, is what are the extra structural factors that have enabled Boko Haram to be transformed in the way and manner it has become, with cross-border links. So I think that this is the bigger question, and probably when my book is eventually published, you will get to buy a copy and you read from that book. But I think that these are the bigger questions, to be answered.
To what do you attribute Boko Haram's ability to retain its appeal and momentum and to continue to recruit even in the face of extreme military action?
I think when you talk about the appeal of Boko Haram, the way you see Sheikh Al-Sound on that video, I don't know if he's appealing to anyone, but you have to make a distinction between 2009, before 2009, that period, and the period after 2009. And there you can now place the lot of appeal. Like some of the prisoners, my boss is here from the European Union, Paul English. When we were interviewing them, some of them told us that they literally donated money to Boko Haram because they never knew that the group was going to be violent after 2009. They simply loved their religion. They were helping Dawah, Islamic propagation, to promote. And I think at that stage, they were appealing because they were able to speak the language of the local ordinary man on the street, language that resonated with the ordinary people. And I think at that stage, the appeal, is very common. You see politicians, lay people, ordinary people in Nigeria, Christians, Muslims, donating to religious organizations. Because no matter how fake it may appear, people are really very religious. They donate to churches, they build churches, they donate to church societies and organizations. So in that context, it was appealing. But after 2009, when they really became violent, what is actually the appeal? And this is where the crux of the matter is. First of all, Shekau and other people really made use of history and memory in the way that I looked at it in this book. And I got that mostly from the translations that I did. I set up 2 teams to help me in Maiduguri, Abuja, and around the Lake Chad border region. Some of them were Hausas, others were Kanuris, others speak very good classical Arabic. And throughout the clips that we translated, there was this constant reference, particularly by Muhammad Yusuf, by Shekau himself and Muhammad Nur. In fact, one of the videos is about 2 hours, and this was as far back as 2000 or 2001. A lot of young people gathered in Maiduguri and listening to these Islamic scholars, and nobody paid any attention to them. And it is because, one, they spoke the ordinary language that a local man on the street of Kanuri will understand. They will speak in Arabic, and if you speak Arabic as an Islamic scholar, of course, you have some level of, some status. And then they speak in Hausa and in Kanuri, and they're able to recall these events. And I think this is one. And number two, probably Shekau appears to be courageous. He appears to be fearless. He can take on the Nigerian political dictators. And I think in that way, and then other factors may be the fact that the way the Nigerian government deployed the military, some people literally joined Boko Haram probably because of victimization by the Nigerian military. And I came across that interviewing soldiers at the border between Nigeria and Cameroon, particularly around southern Adamawa. So you see all these type of issues, came together with the politicization of the whole conflict. Decisions are taken because of political interest, not necessarily because we want to completely eliminate terrorism. So when you look at all these issues, I think they play a factor in the reasons why Boko Haram was really appealing before 2009. But after 2009, I think that whether it was really appealing is debatable. But there's forceful conscription, use of money and strategy and all that.
Let's talk specifically about the history of the Kanem-Bornu Empire. This is what you write about in this publication launched tonight. In what way is this manipulated and used? And how is it intertwined with Islamic history?
Let me just summarize the history just a little bit. First of all, we all know that Boko Haram exposed the jihadi Salafi ideology, trying to return, the Nigerian state back to Islamic rule as it was in the beginning. But they also had to localize the jihadi Salafi ideology and give people reasons why they should believe in them. So what happened was that the Kanem-Bornu Empire started around the 9th, 10th century, around Eastern Lake Chad. Then eventually it was, by the Safa dynasty, it was brought to West Lake Chad, that is around Borno. And in Borno, it really flourished, especially during the time of Idris Aluma. He established like a lot of diplomatic relationships with places like Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, although there were certain conflicts at that time. And then eventually, you find the El Kanemi dynasty took over from the Safa dynasty. And then when Boko Haram now retells this type of history, they choose and they pick which aspect of the history can stimulate interest in their listeners. They give the impression that, wow, there was a flourishing Islamic empire built on the values of equality, justice. Everything was perfect. They were into diplomatic relationship with North Africa. They controlled trans-Saharan trade. And then eventually, the colonial masters came. They didn't only dismantle this Kanem-Bornu empire, they literally parceled out the pieces of land among themselves. Germany took Dikwa, which used to be the capital, including northern Cameroon. Even my village used to be part of the German colony. You understand? Then the French took, Fort Lame, which is present-day Chad. And then the British took northeastern Nigeria, which is today Borno. And so when they are recalling that, they give the impression that, look, it was a flourishing Islamic empire and the colonial masters simply came and took it over. And they didn't only take over, they replaced it with a very corrupt Western state system. And therefore, we should not agree. We have to return to the legacies of the Islamic empire and rebuild that empire. And that's why in some of the videos, Sheikha will say we cannot accept words like obedience, honor, glory, which are all words taken from the national anthem of the Nigerian state. That these words are reserved only for Allah. How can we use these words for the state? So this is the way they manipulate the memory and the history to give the people an impression that this state that has failed you, there was a better state in the past. And therefore, they use it for three things. One, they use it for target selection. Because for the Boko Haram members, there is no distinction between Christianity and the West. Western civilization and Christianity are one and the same thing. So if Obama is speaking, he was sent by Pope Francis. That is their idea, and therefore you are now justified. So target selection, atrocity justification for radicalization, and eventually for recruitment. And the reason is that when I translated the videos, I had the opportunity to work with the EU. And when I went to the prisons and I interviewed most of the Boko Haram members, they were literally able to repeat some of the things that are in this video. And this to tell you the long time they sat under the feet of Shekau, they sat under the feet of Muhammad Yusuf, listening to this exploitation, selective exploitation of history and memory. And I think that for me, if you are really going to be serious with issues of counter-radicalization, de-radicalization, we really need to get to listen to what these people have to say.
Well, that you've almost stolen my next question, which was going to be to play devil's advocate. Well, this is all very well and it's all very interesting, but where does it get us to? Why is it that our knowledge of the way that history and memory is used is important in tackling the insurgency?
It is important because at the beginning of this conflict, first of all, the Nigerian government thought these guys are just poor, ignorant, hungry people, driven really by relative deprivation and by poverty. Jonathan called them faceless masquerades and ghosts. Somebody, Freeman from the Telegraph, said Shekau is more of a psychopath than a militant. Fine, these people are poor, they are ignorant. But for goodness sake, this is almost the 8th year. We deployed a multinational task force, the Nigerian military. We deployed civilian JTF, in fact, including local hunters from my village. But these poor ignorant people, up to now, we have not been able to defeat them. Is it possible that, yes, their methods are not good? They kill civilians, they kill innocent people. But is it possible that if we listen to them, their grievances reflect the grievances of the majority of a voiceless people within a particular environment and context? So that is why, for me, you can kill every single member of Boko Haram. What about the environment that has produced them? Do they reflect that environment when they talk? And so if you are really going to deal with it in terms of de-radicalization and counter-radicalization, even the devil needs to be understood in order to be defeated. You can't defeat the devil without understanding the devil, right? So that is why I think that understanding how they talk, how they think, is very, very important for counter-radicalization.
I think there's a link to understanding the state better. What would you say that the insurgency and Boko Haram, and particularly in the last 7 years, what does it tell you about the state of the state?
The Nigerian state?
Yeah.
This is a very big question. The Nigerian state is, as a Catholic priest, my own commodity is to preach hope. And hope is never in recession, as Bishop Kukah would say. So I don't want it to look as if, all of you know about the Nigerian state, right? The level of corruption, the kind of politics that goes on in Nigeria, the level of identity politics. You have to belong somewhere to another group to have access. And I think that is why we see all these levels of conflict, not just from the northeast with regards to Boko Haram. Even you can see the Niger Delta militants. And even another bigger problem is brewing, that of the herdsmen. I visited Nasarawa State, Benue State. I went to some of the about 5-6 local governments in Benue State. And very recently, I'm going back to the south of Nigeria. What the normal herdsmen are doing is terrible. Normally, herdsmen walk around with sticks. Now they are really walking around with AK-47. So there's serious problem within the Nigerian state. And I think one of the issues is that of impunity. People do things and go free. There is really no accountability. And then number 2, there's absence of state presence on the fringe. communities that come from the fringes, especially around the Lake Chad border region, there are porous areas. One of the immigration officers told me in Abuja, they have about 1,400 and something illegal routes around the Lake Chad border areas, where these Boko Haram guys, they know the area, it is their habitat, they speak the language, they can easily penetrate, through these areas. And I think that these are some of the issues. So to what extent can the Nigerian state deal with issues of corruption, deal with issues of impunity? To what extent can the Nigerian state put aside politics and collaborate with other neighboring states, particularly at these porous border areas in terms of security? So I think these are the issues. And Nigerian state is a very big state, so I don't know. Yeah.
I'd just like to touch on something else that you wrote about in the Counterpoint, which is the canoe issue, because I found this being less familiar than some of you in the audience, most of you probably. I was not familiar with this. Now, you stress that Boko Haram's heartland and most of its recruits are Kanuri, and that the resonance of the Kanem-Bornu empire is strongest perhaps to people from this community. But you equally stress that this is not a Kanuri nationalist movement, and that most Kanuris decry the levels of violence undertaken throughout the region. Can you explain this apparent dichotomy?
Yeah, I have to be very careful here, especially some of my Kanuri friends. I got that idea when I went to Boso and Zinda provinces, and when I came across some of the IDP camps, I discovered some Kanuri friends of mine who ran away from the conflict. When they came down to Boso, some of them were not even living in the camps. They were living with their in-laws, for example. They were living with some of their relatives, And the reason is that I linked that to the level of environmental degradation around the Lake Chad border region. I'm not saying that environmental degradation is the cause of the Boko Haram conflict. That is not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that that area is predominantly very agricultural in nature. The people depend on the land for fishing, for pastoral. You can even see carcass of animals as you are moving to tell you the level of environmental degradation. And of course, a lot of Kanuris really denounce the atrocities. They denounce the atrocities, but because of the historical nature of the place and the influence of the Kanuri language around that area, that is why I made that point. Shekau and others take advantage of the fishing, markets, the fishing union, the Kanuri language, in order probably to recruit, to penetrate the area, to easily move around. Because you have to understand that Borno State in particular and Yobe, for a very long time, Maiduguri in itself was one of the most vibrant cities in the northeast. But for a very long time, most of their connection has to do with across the border rather than with Lagos, for example. So already these guys over the decades, have established a lot of family unions, fishing networks, and all these type of things. And so when this conflict emerged, it was very easy for them because they already knew, the area. And so when even they deployed some soldiers to go there, Nigeria deployed some of the federal workers based on federal character principle. So someone working in the north will be asked to go and work in the south. A southerner is brought to work in the north. And so when you bring a soldier deployed from the south to work in the north, who doesn't speak Hausa, who doesn't speak Kanuri, it's like American soldiers landing in Afghanistan and cannot speak Pashtun. So sometimes it can really be very difficult for security reasons. And so that is why it is not a Kanuri movement, in my opinion. It's not fought on behalf of Kanuri. But at the same time, the environment, the geography, the religion. Because to be Kanuri is almost like to be a Muslim. So Shekau and others have really exploited that and taken advantage of it.